"You've done great work, Madison, but we decided to assign the lead role to someone else." That sentence still echoes in my head like a broken record. It was said in a tone so casual, so careless that it didn't even sting right away, not until I realized what it truly meant. 3 years. 3 years of late nights, cold coffee, missed anniversaries, skipped holidays, all for this project. And now, the man saying those words wasn't just my CEO. He was my father-in-law. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. I stared across the conference room table at the proud grin spreading across his face. Next to him stood Liam, the new intern, 21, fresh out of college, with a handshake so limp it felt like he didn't even want to be there. But apparently, he was the future of the company. Everyone around the room clapped politely. I didn't. My fingers tightened around my pen, knuckles white. My father-in-law, Richard Bennett, looked at me as if expecting gratitude. "Don't take it personally, Madison," he said with that smug, patronizing smile he reserved for his family lectures. "You're part of the foundation here. You'll get another chance." Another chance? I was the foundation. The MassTech AI optimization system, the project that was supposed to define the next decade of our company, was my idea. My baby. I'd built the prototype, pitched it to investors, even secured pre-orders worth millions. But suddenly, it was being handed to an intern who'd barely figured out where the break room was. The reason? Richard wanted to train future leaders. No, the real reason was simpler: control. I wasn't just an employee. I was his daughter-in-law, married to his son, Ethan. And that made me a threat to the delicate ego he protected like a glass throne. I smiled. A slow, polite, razor-edged smile. "Congratulations on the decision," I said softly. He chuckled. "That's the spirit, Madison." But inside, I'd already made mine. That night, I went home to find Ethan waiting for me with a wine bottle and 2 glasses. "Dad told me what happened," he said awkwardly, pouring a drink. I wanted to scream, to throw the glass, to ask how he could possibly defend that. But I just asked, "And what did you say?" He shrugged. "It's business, babe. You know how Dad works. Maybe it's for the best." I didn't hear the rest. My ears buzzed with a cold, burning fury. The next morning, before sunrise, I walked into the office with a single envelope in hand. Inside was my resignation letter, short, professional, and devastatingly precise. When Richard arrived, I placed it on his desk without a word. He read it once, then again. His face turned crimson, eyes darting up at me. "You're joking, right?" he barked, trying to laugh. "You can't just walk out mid-project. We need you too." I cut him off with the same words he'd given me yesterday. "Don't take it personally, Richard." Then I turned and walked away, my heels echoing through the hall like a war drum. Behind me, I heard him slam the desk. "Madison, get back here." But I didn't. Because I knew something he didn't, something that would make his empire crumble. You see, when you build the backbone of a company's most important system, you also know exactly where its weaknesses are. And Richard Bennett had just made the worst business decision of his life. By the time I stepped out of the building, the sun had barely risen, but my phone was already buzzing. Messages from coworkers, managers, even the CTO. "Is it true? What happened? You actually quit?" I just smiled, typed one reply, and pinned it to my chat. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't shouting. It's silence that detonates after you walk away. And oh, did it detonate. Because what Richard didn't realize was that the system he just handed to his golden intern, it wouldn't even function without me. And by the time they figured that out, I'd already begun building something better, something entirely mine. The morning after I resigned, my inbox was already flooded. HR, project managers, department heads, everyone wanted to discuss the situation. Apparently, Richard hadn't told anyone yet. He was probably hoping to convince me to stay before the investors found out. But I wasn't going to stay. I wasn't even going to argue. I was going to let him bury himself with his own arrogance. I sat at my kitchen counter, sipping coffee, staring at the sunlight spilling through the blinds. My laptop was open, but not on company files. I had already locked those. You see, when you're the lead systems architect for an AI infrastructure worth hundreds of millions, you don't just know the code. You own the logic behind it. Every process, every failsafe, every encryption key. And while they technically owned the servers, the underlying framework, well, let's just say I'd written it under a dual intellectual property clause that Richard signed himself 2 years ago. At the time, he'd called it routine paperwork. Now, it was the grenade sitting under his desk. I got a call around noon. "Madison, it's Greg from legal." The company lawyer's voice sounded tight. "Richard's quite upset. He says you left abruptly and took proprietary material with you." I smiled faintly. "I took nothing. Everything belongs to Masstech. However, according to the Centurion agreement." I paused deliberately, letting him remember. "Any modification of my original framework without written consent from me reverts the licensing fees to $50,000 per developer per hour." Greg went completely silent. I could practically hear him swallow. Then a whisper. "Oh my God, he signed that." "Indeed," I said softly. "And if anyone else tries to access my portion of the code, the system will automatically log it as unauthorized use." I ended the call politely. That afternoon, I met Olivia, one of my old coworkers, for lunch. She looked nervous, glancing around before speaking. "Madison, what did you do?" "Richard's having a meltdown upstairs. The system crashed this morning. Liam said he can't even log in." I stirred my coffee slowly, hiding my smile. I didn't do anything malicious. The system was designed to require proper authorization for changes. They revoked my access, which deactivated my clearance key. Without it, the internal compiler won't validate any new builds. She blinked. "In English. They can't fix, edit, or even run the core AI." Her mouth fell open. "Oh my God. He's losing it. The investors are coming next week." "Then I suggest he starts reading his contracts carefully," I said. That evening, I got a text from an unknown number. "You think this is funny? You're destroying your husband's family's company. Call me, Richard." I didn't reply, because he wasn't wrong. I was destroying it. But I wasn't doing it out of pettiness. I was doing it because they destroyed me first. They took my work, my loyalty, my name, and turned it into a joke at the office. The family hire. The pretty coder. The lucky one who married the boss's son. But soon, they'd remember my name not as an afterthought, but as the one who walked away and left a crater behind. By the next morning, the company was in freefall. Olivia sent me a message. "The investor demo's been postponed. Richard's calling emergency meetings. CTO's threatening to resign." Meanwhile, I was in my home office, surrounded by design sketches and whiteboards filled with ideas. I wasn't celebrating their chaos. I was creating something better. My own system. My own architecture. No investors. No board. No politics. I called it Ether, a name that meant pure essence, untouchable and limitless. While Masstech scrambled to fix the broken framework I'd built for them, I was designing a new AI model, cleaner, faster, and fully mine. Every piece of their panic only fueled me more. Every message from ex-colleagues asking what's going on reminded me how small people with power could be when faced with someone who truly understood the machine. Then came the moment that changed everything. Late one night, I got an email from the company's investors themselves. "Madison, we understand you are no longer with Masstech. However, we would love to discuss your involvement in the original AI optimization project. We've heard interesting things." That was the moment the scales tipped. I didn't reply immediately. Instead, I let Richard sweat through another sleepless weekend trying to get his interns and junior devs to fix what they couldn't even comprehend. Then, on Monday morning, I walked into a downtown cafe where the lead investor, Mr. Calloway, was waiting. He shook my hand firmly. "I'll be blunt," he said. "The system doesn't work without you. If you're planning anything new, we'd like to hear it." That's when I realized. Revenge wasn't about taking something from them. It was about taking back what was already mine. And this time, I wasn't just going to build a system. I was going to build an empire. The first sign of Richard's panic came 3 days after my meeting with the investors. I was in my apartment, coding with jazz music in the background, when my phone lit up, Ethan calling. I hadn't spoken to him in a week. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Madison. His voice cracked slightly. What did you do? I leaned back in my chair. What do you mean? Dad's losing it, he said quickly. The system keeps locking itself. Clients are threatening lawsuits. He says you sabotaged the whole thing. I exhaled slowly. Ethan, you know I don't sabotage. Everything I built was by the book. Maybe your dad should have read the fine print. There was a pause. I could almost hear his guilt through the line. I didn't know he was going to give it to Liam. I swear. I know you didn't, I said softly. But you still watched it happen. That silence cut deeper than anything. After a long moment, I ended the call. Because while part of me still cared for him, the other part, the one that had been humiliated in front of an entire boardroom, was far louder. Meanwhile, news about Mastek's meltdown began spreading. Tech blogs whispered about a critical failure in their flagship AI system. Employees leaked screenshots of error messages, core access invalid, license revoked. Investors were furious. Contracts were suspended. And Richard Bennett, the proud CEO who once dismissed me with a smirk, was now facing questions he couldn't answer. I didn't have to do anything. The dominoes were falling exactly how arrogance always makes them fall, hard, loud, and irreversible. While Mastek scrambled, I was busy building. My apartment had turned into a war room, whiteboards covered in flowcharts, sticky notes, and coffee cups marking late nights of design. My creation, Ether, was shaping into something revolutionary. It wasn't just an upgrade. It was a system that could learn without human prompts, adaptive intelligence that would make outdated Mastek software look like a toy. Olivia started helping me remotely. She'd finally quit Mastek after seeing the chaos firsthand. You should see Richard, she texted one night. He's screaming at IT like they can resurrect your code with duct tape. I laughed out loud. It wasn't cruelty, it was justice. Then came the call I'd been expecting. Greg, from legal. Madison, he said nervously. There's a situation. Richard wants to know if you'd consider consulting, just temporarily. He's willing to pay your rate. My rate? I said, pretending to think. Yes, your consulting rate, Greg said quickly. Whatever it was before. Oh, that rate doesn't exist anymore, I replied calmly. According to the Centurion clause, unauthorized use of my framework reverts to a penalty fee of $50,000 per developer per hour. And since your team has been accessing my code for, I glanced at the clock. About 72 hours now. That puts you at roughly 8 figures. Greg made a choking sound. Please tell me you're not serious. I'm entirely serious, I said sweetly. I have the access logs. Every login attempt, every unauthorized build. The system recorded all of it. Madison, this could destroy the company. Then maybe you should have thought of that before stealing someone else's work. I hung up. 2 hours later, Richard called me directly. His voice was a mix of rage and desperation. Madison, listen to me. You're making a mistake. This is family. No, Richard. I interrupted. This is business. You made it that way when you humiliated me in front of your board. You think walking away makes you powerful? You're ruining everything Ethan worked for. I froze at his attempt to guilt-trip me. Classic corporate manipulation disguised as morality. Ethan chose silence, I said evenly. You chose greed. I chose freedom. And then, before he could respond, I added quietly, good luck with the investors tomorrow. Then I hung up again. The next morning, my prediction hit him like a storm. Mastek's lead investor, Callaway, confronted Richard in a board meeting. Olivia later told me what happened. He tried to demo the AI, she said, almost whispering. It crashed on screen, in front of everyone. And the moment they restarted it, your contract clause triggered a compliance lock. I smiled. The clause that suspends usage until licensing fees are paid? She nodded. Exactly. The lawyer shouted, oh my God. Fees revert to $50,000 an hour. Callaway turned white. Richard just froze. That same evening, my inbox pinged again. This time, from Callaway Ventures. We'd like to formally discuss funding for your new venture. We believe your next product could redefine the market. It was poetic. The same investors who had doubted me when I was just an employee were now chasing me, not the company that had betrayed me. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small, or invisible, or silenced. I felt unstoppable. But I wasn't done. Not yet. Because the final blow, the one that would make the entire corporate world remember Madison Carter's name, was still waiting. And Richard Bennett had no idea it was already set in motion. By the time the sun rose on Monday, the tech world was buzzing. MasTech, once the shining star of AI innovation, was bleeding out in public. TechCrunch ran a headline. Mass tech system crashes during investor demo. Legal crisis unfolds. Every word in that article felt like poetic justice. I sat in my apartment, scrolling through the chaos while sipping coffee from a mug that read, "Built not bought." The irony wasn't lost on me. A notification pinged, a message from Olivia. Richard's lost it. He fired half the dev team. HR quit. He's blaming everyone. Then another one came in. Investors are demanding an emergency audit. The board's considering freezing all executive privileges. I couldn't help smiling. The empire he built on ego was collapsing faster than he ever imagined. But I wasn't just here to watch. I was here to finish it. That afternoon, I sent a single email, short, polite, and surgical, to the entire MasTech legal department, CC'd to the investors and the board. Subject: Notice of License Violation, Centurion AI Framework. In the body, I included the full legal clause Richard had signed 2 years ago, the one he called routine paperwork. At the bottom, I attached access logs showing exactly 16 developers had entered my system without authorization for over 112 hours. And then the final line. Per Section 4, Subclause D, total outstanding fees now exceed $89,600,000. Failure to settle within 14 business days will result in federal IP litigation. I hit send. And with that, I didn't just end a company. I detonated a legal bomb no PR team could ever defuse. 2 hours later, my phone rang. It was Greg, the lawyer, again. His voice was shaking. "Madison, the board just had an emergency call. They're furious. Richard's trying to say you trapped him, that you used legal trickery." I leaned back in my chair, smiling faintly. "Greg, I gave him every chance to play fair. He chose otherwise." He's been removed as CEO," Greg stammered. "Effective immediately." I froze for just a second, then exhaled, slowly. The sound of poetic justice had never felt so calm. Later that evening, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Ethan was standing there, rumpled, exhausted, and holding a folder. "Madison, please," he said, voice trembling. "You've made your point. My father's finished. The company's collapsing. Do you really want to drag this through court?" I crossed my arms. "Do you want to know what I wanted, Ethan? I wanted respect. I wanted to be treated as more than the daughter-in-law, playing engineer. But your father turned my work into his empire and thought I wouldn't notice." He looked down, ashamed. "He's being investigated. The investors froze his accounts. He asked me to beg you to drop the claim." I hesitated for a moment. There was still a part of me that remembered the dinners, the shared laughter before greed poisoned everything. But then I remembered the night he stood in that boardroom, smirking while giving my project to an intern. "No," I said quietly. "He made his choices. Now he can live with them." Ethan's eyes filled with regret. "He'll lose everything." I stepped closer, my voice calm but cold. He already did the moment he underestimated me. He left without another word. The next morning, I woke up to over 100 missed calls. MasTech was trending on Twitter. Screenshots of the legal notice I sent had leaked. The public was eating it up. She warned them. Queen behavior, they stole her work. She invoiced them for it. $50,000 an hour? Iconic. Memes, articles, think pieces. The entire internet was celebrating the revenge of the woman who refused to be silenced. At noon, I got a call from Callaway Ventures again. "Madison," the investor said, his tone firm but excited, "we've officially severed ties with Mastech. We want to back your new company. Full funding. Name your number." For a moment, I was silent. Then I said, "I don't want to rebuild what they had. I want to build something better." He laughed. "That's exactly why we're calling you." Within 48 hours, the paperwork was signed. Within a week, Ether Innovations was officially born. And within a month, every publication that once praised Mastech was now writing headlines like, "Former employee launches rival company, outperforms ex-employer within weeks." As I stood in my new office, overlooking downtown Chicago, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The glass walls reflected my own face back at me. Not the silent employee anymore, but the architect of my own future. Revenge hadn't been loud. It hadn't been violent. It had been precise. And as I turned off my phone, letting the noise of the outside world fade away, I whispered to myself, "Never underestimate the woman who built the system you tried to steal." 6 months later, I was standing on a stage again, not as an employee this time, but as the founder and CEO of Ether Innovations. The auditorium lights glowed soft gold across hundreds of faces, investors, engineers, and young women from universities all over the country. The air was filled with a quiet energy, that beautiful mix of curiosity, admiration, and belief. Behind me, the screen displayed the words I'd chosen carefully. "Power is built, not granted." That phrase had become the soul of everything I created after walking away from Mastech. Ether Innovations wasn't just a company. It was a statement. We weren't trying to outdo anyone. We were redefining what tech leadership looked like. My team wasn't afraid to take credit, to speak up, to shine. There were no stolen ideas, no invisible workers, no unpaid overtime to feed someone else's ego. I'd built the exact culture I once wished for. And for the first time in my career, I didn't feel like I had to shrink to fit in. One afternoon, during our launch event for Ether Atlas, our first AI-driven ecosystem, reporter asked the question everyone had been dying to know. "Madison, what inspired you to start this company after leaving Mastech?" I smiled. The cameras were flashing, but my voice stayed calm. "I didn't start this out of anger," I said. "I started it because I refused to let disrespect be the last word in my story. Sometimes the best revenge isn't destruction, it's creation." The crowd erupted in applause. I looked out and spotted familiar faces, Olivia, Greg, a few others who had stood by me when I walked away. They were smiling, proud. That moment felt like closure. Not just on the betrayal, but on the version of me who thought she needed permission to shine. Later that night, after the event, I drove to the lake. Chicago's skyline shimmered across the water like a sea of glass and fire. I thought about everything that had happened: Richard, the intern, the chaos, the silence after the storm. There was a time when the memory of his smug smile used to make my hands tremble. Now, it just made me grateful. If he hadn't taken what was mine, I might never have realized how strong I truly was. My phone buzzed. It was a news notification. Mastech officially files for bankruptcy. For a moment, I stared at the headline. No satisfaction. No anger. Just peace. Justice had already been served. This was just the echo. I turned off the screen and looked out at the city again. Somewhere out there, Richard was probably sitting in his empty mansion, wondering how it all slipped through his fingers. And I hoped, deep down, that he'd finally learned what power really means and what it costs when you take it for granted. A week later, I got an email from Ethan. Subject: Congratulations. Body: You were right. He underestimated you. We all did. I hope you're happy truly. You earned it. I sat quietly for a while, rereading his words. Then I typed a simple reply. I am. And hit send. That was the last time I ever heard from him. 2 months after that, Forbes named me in their top 10 women in tech rewriting the industry list. They ran a full-page article titled, From Betrayal to Billion-Dollar Blueprint, The Rise of Madison Hale. I didn't care about the number next to my name or the valuation beside my company. What mattered was the legacy. Because every young woman reading that article would know that it's okay to walk away from places that don't respect you, even if it means starting from zero. One evening, as I was locking up the office, Olivia stopped by my desk. She grinned. "Hey boss, remember when they gave your project to an intern?" I laughed.
Yeah.
Hard to forget. "Well," she said, handing me a tablet, "looks like the intern just applied here." I raised an eyebrow. "No kidding?"
Yep.
"He says he's looking for a second chance." For a moment, I thought about it, about how the old me might have rejected him instantly. But growth isn't about revenge anymore. It's about power used wisely. "Tell him to come in," I said. "Everyone deserves a chance to learn what respect looks like." Olivia smirked. "That's why you're the boss." That night, as I stepped into the elevator, I caught my reflection in the glass doors. Confident.
Calm. Free.
The scars were still there, but they'd turned into something stronger. Proof that you can be broken and still come back sharper than ever. As the elevator descended, I whispered softly to myself, the words I'd once said in defiance now echoing like victory. "Congratulations on the decision." This time, the smile on my face was genuine.